Yeah. So, welcome. Today we've got the real privilege of meeting with one of Gorilla's, how would you describe him? Infamous backroom boys. One of the things that sets Gorilla apart from everything else is the jingles, the multiplicity, quite literally thousands of jingles that we have. And we're extraordinarily fortunate to have a number of talented, dedicated, funny, and mad people creating those jingles. And possibly the most prolific of those is based in Melbourne, and his name is, to all of us, Mog. Welcome today, Mog.
Hello. Hi. Sorry to ruin any impressions people may have had.
Well, at least the axes are behind you.
I've got plenty of those if you need any.
Oh dear. So, just can you give us a potted history of Mog? Of, where you're from. Maybe you're growing up in connection with sport, and we'll come on to connection with Gorilla cricket a little later.
I was born in Tasmania, in a place called Wynyard, which several reasonably well-known state cricketers are from there. Sean Young, I think, is from there. He might have played a single test, so that clearly elevates him. Jamie Cox was born nearby, and there are a couple of others as well. Dean Hills, I think, like the other guy. I lived in a place called Zerost, which is not far from the Botswana.
Is that Zero with an ST on?
No, it's ZERUST.
Oh,
it's an Afrikaans.
Oh, it's a bit disappointing. I was hoping you came from St. Zero.
I can't think of any witty town names off the top of my head like that.
So
I come from.
So where were you saying Zerost was?
It's not far from the Botswanan border in South Africa.
Right.
So that was exciting. And then I moved to a place called Shepparton, which is in country Victoria. And then I escaped that hellhole, and I've been in Melbourne for decades. Yeah.
Where did you come into connection with cricket first?
That's a good question. My parents weren't necessarily hugely interested in sport. I think it was just a case of watching it on TV and enjoying it as much as anything. I have memories of my grandmother complaining that commentators in the early 80s were saying someone was clean bowled when it had actually come off the pads onto the stumps. And that didn't fit her definition of clean bowled. So
pedantry is always good.
In hindsight, she was correct, but at the time it didn't work for me. When in high school, I didn't play cricket. I played tennis and badminton. I was reasonably good at badminton. And then when I moved to Melbourne, I played a bit of cricket at that point and proved to be astoundingly mediocre.
Did you enjoy it, though?
I enjoyed it, yeah.
Well, you seem to have something in common with some of the other gorillas I've interviewed, is that performance doesn't detract from the enjoyment.
I nearly made 100 once. That's the pinnacle of my cricketing career. So
you're more of a batter than a bowler?
I did both, but I think my batting was probably, I can probably say my leg side batting was better than anything. You wouldn't catch me playing very many sort of cut shots or anything like that. Lots of whipping off the pads, lots of attempted whippings off pads.
Yeah.
But
so I'm guessing too that music's been a big part of your life.
It's funny because as I didn't really have any interest in music at all until maybe my last year of high school. And then I joined a band with a couple of people I knew from high school who were musical. I had no, as is evident quite often, I had no sort of training or anything like that in it. So they hired me to be hired. They got me to be the singer, and I would write the words, and so we did that for a little while. The first gig we played was at a pub that had been the victim of a drive-by shooting the week before, so that was pretty exciting.
I bet it was packed out.
There were 63 people there.
My goodness.
Because we got $1 for every person that came in the front door.
So you spread the word and said, come down to the pub today.
Yeah, it was essentially probably everybody we knew.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know if there's anybody who was a stranger.
And you didn't actually mention the drive-by shooting the week before?
No. Although, yeah, if we were a slightly darker band, maybe that would have been
an added attraction.
We were a sort of our big influences were sort of REM, Faith No More, and Queen, more or less. So, bit of a departure to the kind of stuff I enjoy now.
Yeah, well, what? So, I won't even try and name it. Tell me what you actually do music-wise these days, apart from jingles.
Other than jingles, I tend to call it crapcore, which is part of my delightfully self-deprecating sense of humour. It sort of straddles the line between grindcore and a thing called noisecore. Grindcore is a little bit more structured and a little bit more legible, whereas noisecore, the aesthetic is more you just make some noise.
So noisecore is for people who actually don't have any musical talent whatsoever.
That's probably why I'm doing it. Yeah.
But are very good with self-deprecation.
Well, we'll see about that, won't we? As we continue on. But yeah, so I did do sort of crappy synth pop and rock kind of songs just for my own amusement for a while, but I tended to find it. I'm the sort of person that prefers the outcome rather than the process, and it's quicker to make a 40-second grindcore song than it is to painfully organise a 4-minute rock song with a guitar solo and intros and bridges and things like that. So it's
makes sense.
It suits my gratification urge.
Yeah, well, I suspect most of us are a bit like that, truth be known.
Instant gratification.
So where did you first come into contact with Guerrilla Cricket or Test Match Sofa, whichever it was?
It was Test Match Sofa back in those days. I was I don't even remember what year it was. It was probably not that long after they'd started, I think. And it would have been something I wanted to listen to late at night. So it would have been a series in England. And I was just going through, might have even been something like Winamp's radio stations, some now very much obsolete bit of software. And I found this thing called Test Match Sofa, thought I'd listen to it. I found Sherwood highly amusing. I liked Hendo's voice, but Norcross just gave me the shits, to be perfectly honest.
You're not Robinson Crusoe in that regard.
So I probably didn't go back immediately, and sort of went back a few months. It was probably slightly longer than that. Whenever the next series was.
Yeah.
And got to know them a bit better and get used to the in jokes about the Katie's anecdotes and that sort of thing. So, and then they clearly carked it, and I think I found Guerrilla Cricket on the second day it had come back. I think.
Yeah.
And tragically, I haven't been able to shake that addiction.
What is it that keeps you addicted?
Partly because they read out my tweets.
Yes. Yeah, I can
Partly
relate.
because they play those horrifying songs that I do. And partly just because it's nice not to hear the standard former sportsmen buffheads who are busy coming up with nicknames for each other and guffawing every time a big unit comes on the ground to face placed a heavy ball,
Uh,
some in a corridor of uncertainty or whatever other bullshit I come up with.
So you're not a cliche fan?
No, I think if you went back and looked over a lot of the history of my comments on cricket, a lot of it would be, "Shut up, Brad Hodge.
Yes.
Shane Warne, you're a fuckwit.
Yep.
Why must you inflict these retards on us?"
Yep.
That kind of thing. So.
Yep. Well, you're not alone in that either. So who lured you into actually being a jingle writer in all of this?
I don't think anybody lured me as such. The first jingle I sent in was a 6 jingle, which just goes jet, 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 6. And I think I just asked the bear, "Can anybody send a jingle in?"
Yeah.
So I sent a jingle in. Yeah. And it was obviously the right song to start with. And after that, I guess it was just a case of if they need a jingle, I can knock one up and send one in. And then I started sending things in that they didn't ask for. And yeah, now we get emails from Knackle or whoever, and it says, "Right, this series coming up, we need this person, this person, this person," and we jinglers go off and work.
So what's the process for that? So Knackle suddenly says to you, "Well, actually, we decided to do the IPL tomorrow. We need 14 jingles for new people you've never heard of." So what do you do when you find that someone you've never heard of is suddenly going to need a jingle?
Quite often it will just be looking at the person's name.
Yeah.
And if the name immediately reminds me of a song, I'll just go and find that song. And these days I tend to record my own versions of them. Back before YouTube started firing strikes off, I would find instrumentals of things and just karaoke over the top of them a lot of the time. So unless someone gives me a specific idea, like Ollie Pope, the Ollie Pope jingle was one of Knackle's ideas, which he said, "If you want to do this." I don't always take the ideas. Sometimes they're really terrible.
Surprise.
Not necessarily Knackle's ideas, all of your ideas, possibly. And sometimes I do. It's an odd process in that sometimes I'll just be wandering around the house singing to my cats, and I'll think, "Oh, I could probably turn that into a jingle about insert random IPL fifth stringer here," kind of thing. So sort of make little notes about things. And
do you enjoy it?
Do I enjoy it?
Yeah.
If I didn't enjoy it, I probably wouldn't still do it, I guess. It's a little frustrating
because I mean, there are jingles you do that never get played, aren't there?
There would be. I think I've probably sent in nigh on 1,000 just myself.
Wow.
And some of those are admittedly just crappy YouTube rips. Saying 4 in German or whatever. Although that one I think I mixed with something else, so it's a new artwork because they're all art. Of course they are. But yeah, there's plenty of players that I do things for that the player never ever plays. Or probably more often Jeff or Senor Peel will come up with something that's better.
Do you liaise with Jeff and Richard and Men with a Van about those sorts of things?
Generally, when Knackle sends out an enormous list, he'll attach a Google Doc thingy, and we'll sort of go, "Oh, okay, well, I'll do these ones if you want to do that one," or someone's got an idea for whichever, they jump on board and go ahead and do it.
It's a sort of sweatshop, really, isn't it?
Sweatshop wages. Quite often you get the verbal lashes from the overseer's whip. Knackle likes us to pronounce things properly. So
no, such a pet.
You get someone's name wrong, you'll probably tell you, which is fair enough if it's a product. But who knows when inspiration strikes? Sometimes it's just comes completely out of your ass. And sometimes it probably should have not come out of your ass because it's shit. So,
so tell me, which of your creations is your favourite jingle?
I do quite like that very first 6 jingle I sent in.
Yeah.
And I think I've made the mistake of trying to copy it for future 6 jingles afterwards, subsequent. I really like the Steve O'Keefe jingle I did.
Yes, I like that one too.
And there's a few of the Indian women's team that I did jingles for the Women's World Cup last time or the time before, whenever it was, that I'm not sure even got played.
Yeah, well, I noticed when I went through the archive a couple of months ago, before we did the Jingle Ashes, how many jingles there are there that I had never heard before, both from you and Jeff Perkins in particular. Just so much stuff there; it's unbelievable.
I thought I'd done a quite a good jingle for Colin de Grandhomme.
Yep.
And then Peel delivered this magnificent piece of existential terror based on a Pink Floyd song. And so there was.
Yeah.
I'm not
that is pretty special, isn't it?
Yeah, it's.
Which is your favourite? If this isn't going to tread on toes, which is your favourite jingle that's not yours?
That's a good question. The first one that comes to mind is Dale Steyn.
Yep.
Took his photo pissing on a golf course, Kyle Abbott.
Yep.
Which clearly we're never going to hear that again. But
I'm sure we'll find an excuse somewhere.
Oh well, it's in the archive. Everything's in the archive. Of the current ones, the de Grandhomme one's pretty good. And KL Rahul's that Jeff did. I'm not sure why, because I don't know if it's a Beatles song or not, but it's precisely the opposite to the sort of music I would ever give the time of day to. But for some reason, it just sticks in my head.
Yeah.
So that one as well. Probably should have prepared a list so I can look like I actually do remember something about.
Oh no, I'd much rather it's off the cuff, because this way it's coming from the gut rather than the head.
Tim Bresling's another good one. Always been a big fan of that.
Oh, that's wonderful, isn't it? I think we're very
Ian Bell, blessed. The old Ian Bell one.
Oh yes, that went on forever, didn't it? Yeah.
Oh, and the Luke Wright one.
Yeah, look right through you.
The cricket ball, Luke Wright through me. It's going to keep popping up as we go on now. So.
Oh dear. So what? I take it. Are you still playing any cricket or not?
No. I'd like to say it was because of injuries that stopped me. I do have a bit of a dodgy back, but it was more just abject laziness.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. I think that also applies to a lot of our cohort. And
last time I played was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I did reasonably well, but it nearly killed me. So it was probably best just to retire on a semi-high note.
So I think it's fair to say that you also have a reputation for something that I'm loath to refer to it as a fetish, but I look behind you and I noticed a number of implements of war or torture. Where do they fit into your life, as it were?
I'm a bit of a history nerd.
Yeah.
And I guess a part of really don't know. It's sort of the tactile sensation in a way of just holding some enormous chunk of sharpened metal designed to take off a head in some ways. Some of them are genuine works of art. They're just these beautifully created things. And some of them are just these brutalist, efficient lumps of metal that are designed to, like I said, take off a head or cave someone's skull in. And a lot of the time, I just like looking at them.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what it is. It's.
Are they just weapons, or are some of them actually historical pieces of some sort?
I've probably only got one or two that would classify as antiques. I've got a couple of Central African short swords that are from the 19th century, which I got purely because they just looked interesting.
Yeah.
Not because I'm overly sort of attached to that period or anything. Most of the stuff I would get would be sort of 12th century backwards from there. So,
wow.
I've got some recreations of Egyptian things, which I can't see from here. But yeah, I do like stuff in bronze.
And
so,
I mean, it looks to me like your house is probably fairly full of them, given the fact that the door is extremely loaded behind you. Is that indicative of the rest of the place? Or?
I've got, just off this direction, there's a cupboard that's basically full of them. And just behind you, there is a case that's full of them. And then just next to that, underneath where the bed is, there's another great big pile of them.
Well, I think you could be a candidate for a reality TV show anytime soon.
Hoarders, probably.
Or axe hoarders, yes.
Yeah. So,
but hopefully the police aren't aware of all these.
Well, they can be aware of it because I have all the proper licenses and meet all the required standards.
You actually have to have licenses for those things?
Yeah.
Wow.
Axes you don't, because otherwise you could never chop down a tree. But any sort of edged weapon over a certain length, you've got to have a permit for. I don't think I've got anything that's particularly illegal. I've got some maces, but there's a strange differentiation between flanged maces and faceted maces.
I find that mildly disappointing that you don't have anything illegal, but
well, I'm not going to say it on here if I do, am I? Come on.
Have you actually ever wielded anything in anger?
I have. Well, in anger, I'm not sure. It's not like I chased a burglar down the street waving a Viking axe at them. I've done a few. It was a thing called HEMA, historical European martial arts, where you basically put on a whole bunch of armor and you belt each other with blunted weapons. And it's terrifying and it's quite painful. But it's also quite fun afterwards. Once you realise you haven't got any broken fingers and all of your teeth are still in your head, and if you can actually get the helmet off, it's quite fun.
Sort of like, facing Courtney Walsh on a fast track and surviving.
Yeah, you'd want every possible piece of protective equipment. Several boxes, half a dozen arm guards, as many rib guards as you can stuff under your armpit, that sort of thing.
So yeah. I'm going to take you back to one more thing. Your first memory of watching it live high-grade cricket.
I went to a test at the MCG in about, it's either 1983 or 84, I think. I could probably look it up, but it was Australia versus the West Indies. And I still lived out in the country at that point, so we came down. And a few weeks after that, a West Indies 11 came out and played a rural Victorian 11. And I met, who did I meet? Several. Well, Joel Garner. I met Joel Garner. He was one. There's a couple other guys who I can't quite remember who they were now. But they were taking it in the spirit that it was intended that your Victorian rural 11's not really going to survive if Colin Croft is coming in and trying to take your head off. So I think they were being very gentle with them. And it was just more of a social event, so that was good. And
do you go and watch the cricket much these days?
Not as much as I used to. I was going to go to the third day of the third test, but we know how that turned out.
Yeah, you and Forthy both. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Prior to that, I went to a couple of WBBL games that were played in Camberwell, which isn't all that far from me. and I was all set to go to a bunch of T20 World Cup games.
Yeah.
But since they moved it, I wasn't really going to fly to the UAE to do that. So
pretty poor. Well, maybe you get a chance later this year. I get the sense from the occasional tweet that you send in that you're not what could be regarded as a rusted-on Australian supporter.
Has that come through?
Yeah. Do you support anybody in Test cricket generally, or just go for the individuals?
If there was a team I would follow, it would probably be. I guess it depends on the format. Probably New Zealand, as far as tests go.
Yeah.
And then probably.
You're gone on mute. You've muted yourself somehow.
Still there?
Yeah, you said probably New Zealand on a test basis, and then it went blank.
Yeah, probably I have the most interest in countries like Afghanistan.
Yep.
I've been more interested in the sort of associate countries for a reasonable amount of time, if only because the test world is kind of toxic and boring a lot of the time.
Yeah. So your favourite and your least favourite cricketers then?
My favourite ever cricketer is probably Alan Border.
Wow.
Which is odd, possibly.
Yeah, it surprises me, I must say.
He probably got his hooks into me as a child, and I've just never quite got past it. A big fan of Lance Klusener. Quite liked his work. Brian McMillan. Kane Richardson. It's hard not to like him.
Yeah.
Stephen Fleming. There's not a lot of Australians that are going to appear on the good list.
No, I sort of guessed that. Yeah. So who's on your bad list?
Basically any Australian cricketer since 1992.
That's a big list.
A lot of people. I was actually saying to someone at work today,
even some Paddy Cummings.
Well, this is one of the least objectionable teams Australia's put out. Well, based on my exacting standards, even though they still have Warner and Smith, who just shoot you to tears, and Nathan Lyon, who mystifies me. I don't understand it. But Cummins and Marcus Harris is sort of a nothing, so it's hard to.
Yeah.
But my least favourite Australian cricketer, and possibly cricketer ever, is Glenn McGrath.
Oh.
His nickname is Pigeon because he likes dirty birds.
Oh.
An appropriate thing to say before the Sydney.
The pink day, yeah.
So,
there's
just something about him as a player and afterwards with his constant, well, this will be a 5-0 win for Australia in the face of any possible reality.
I'm surprised there's not a prominent Victorian appearing on your list, to be totally honest. Durry Smoker, Hare Weaver.
He's gone to sort of he's a self-parroting stage. He's certainly not someone I would cross the road to piss on if he was on fire. But he's just such a joke. I think now that it's taken the edge off what a truly cretinous person he is. He's one of very few Australian cricketers I've ever had any sort of second-hand interaction with, and that he came into a KFC I was in and stood in the doorway expectantly hoping people would notice him, and nobody did, and he still wandered up and a half. That was probably in the mid-90s, so he wasn't necessarily as famous as he could have been. But
there was a lovely description Hendo did in his book about the 2006-7 tour, was it? The test in Adelaide, where England looked like winning and then fucked it up completely, thanks to Shane Warne. And he said he was standing next to an Australian in the crowd who was really excited about Warren doing so well. And he said, he's great, Warney, isn't he? Before, to my surprise, he completely changed tack, adding, but I can't stand the man. He's a total cockhead. If he walked into my local, I'd smack him straight in the face. I think that's a fairly common view of Shane Warne, to be honest.
It's very much that magnificent sportsman, but just a shit bloke.
Yeah.
And I think he ranks fairly highly.
Yeah.
As far as
Oh shit! I've realised I've gone well over time again.
Which is I haven't made any points with my pipe yet.
Oh, your pipe! You're doing a Bill Bailey, are you?
I'm just going to emphasise something with it.
What would you like to emphasise the most of all?
Virat Kohli looks like an angry camel.
Angry camel? I hadn't. Angry, I get. Camel, I hadn't noticed before. But
just sometimes when he when
just
he's
he gets
at
the
people
hump
in the crowd, his face, his jaw slightly goes sideways, and it just reminds me for some reason of a camel about to spit on someone.
Good point. And he's got the hump, so yeah.
Right.
It works fairly well.
And look, he's shot. He's not going to make another run ever. So let's just delete this part if it turns out he makes a triple ton in his next test. But that's
yeah. I mean, you can be due, or you can be overdue, or you can just be never. And it's sort of looking like never at the moment, isn't it? Well, I just want to say thank you very much, Mog, for spending some time with us. And in particular, thank you for all the creative energy you put into being heard probably a dozen times every day, that at least a dozen times every day that we're on air. And I think it's fair to say that Gorilla listeners hear you more than they realize and appreciate it very much. So thank you very much, Mog.
Sort of oral lack of consent, really. But I'm happy to be able to do it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Always a pleasure.